Latest episode of the Dribble Drive podcast. Your host, Austin Render, and substitute host for the second time this year, Matt Park from Michigan Women's Basketball is joining us as Dalton Shetler makes the trip back from the West Coast. He is out of commission this morning with some late night travels, so we went and grabbed Matt Park again. Matt, how are you, sir?
I'm good, Austin. Appreciate being here. I'm going to have to give Michigan State their flowers pretty soon, so it's going to be tough for me, but hey, we got to do what we got to do.
I think this episode's going to start with your two biggest rivals. We're going to have to give them flowers with Michigan State and Ohio State. We'll certainly talk plenty of them. We'll talk about your Wolverines as well. It feels like a while ago, but a big win over Minnesota a week ago. We'll talk about that. UCLA seems to be on cruise control. Iowa is still undefeated. Purdue gets 2 wins last week. We're going to talk about all that as we go through the show here. But just a reminder, we are on the Back Home Network YouTube channel. We're live right now. If you're with us, drop your comments in the chat. We'd love to hear from you. If you are listening to us after the fact, we're also available on Apple and Spotify podcasts, and you can always watch us on that Back Home Network YouTube channel. We are going every Monday throughout the season as much as we possibly can live throughout this crazy Big Ten women's basketball season that already has had a lot of twists and turns. With that, let's jump into things here, Matt. We do got to start with Dalton Spartans, who go 2-0 on the West Coast. They started with this win over Washington, which was a crazy game. They were down early in this one, and they were not down long. So they were trailing by 11 after the first quarter. Then they won the second and third quarters by a combined 48-22, and they stormed away from Washington, which we'll talk about the Huskies later. They did not have a great week. But Michigan State, it's not easy. We've all had to travel out west in some form or fashion. It's not easy to go out there and get wins against these really talented teams. And Michigan State got this one. We'll talk about the Oregon one in a second. But it does feel like, Matt, this Michigan State team is back where we saw them preseason, which was a top 4 or 5 team in this league. The Wisconsin loss was kind of a head scratcher, but it seems like they've put that behind them.
Yeah, that may be, outside of Purdue winning over Washington yesterday, the most surprising result in the Big Ten this year, with Wisconsin beating Michigan State. Regardless, look, we just made that trip a couple of weeks ago. Those are 2 good teams. Those are 2 tough environments to play in. And we were leaving State College on Thursday night as that game was tipping off. So we were sort of following it early and saw that Michigan State was down big early. El Ladine got off to a hot start. By the time we land in Willow Run, Michigan State's killing them. So a huge turnaround, as you mentioned. And Michigan State's got this way right now. It just feels like it's sort of figuring out the game, unlocking whatever it is that the other team wants to do, and then figuring out how to play their own game against it. And that's exactly what they did against Washington. Washington's a very, very good execution team. They execute in the half court especially well. And Michigan State absolutely took that away from them after that first quarter. Like you mentioned, outscoring the team by 48. I think Washington scored maybe 20 points over those 2 periods after getting 25 in the first. Impressive work by the Spartans, no doubt.
They have so many punches that they can hit you with. And I want to single out Rashunda Jones. We saw it a little bit in her Purdue tenure. She had some flashes. That Purdue team was not the most talented around her, so a lot was thrown on her shoulders. She is really flourishing in this Robin Fralick system. She's having a great season. She does a lot of things. She's pesky defensively. She makes the right decisions on offense, can shoot the ball, can get to the basket. And it feels like honestly, when I found out that Theron Halleck was out against Ole Miss and they had a banged up team just in general, it's like, oh, it's not going to be great for Michigan State. They win that game. And Theron came back for a couple games. Now she's out again. They just keep rolling. And these role players, it feels like everybody in the Robin Fralick system has figured out where they fit, what their role is on this team, what they are supposed to do. Kennedy Blair just does everything. She does all the little things, all the dirty work. You've got Grace Van Sluten rebounding the ball really well right now. Jaylen Brown's adding a lot to this team. It just feels like everybody has bought in to what Robin Fralick and her staff are asking them to do. And this is a Washington team. You saw it, Matt. They are a great defensive team. They can shut you down. and Michigan State throws 82 on them. And this was really impressive from the Spartans. We're going to talk about our Power 5 later in the show, but I mean, this is a team that deserves to be in the conversation at the top of the Big Ten right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think you'll see them rise again this week in the top 25 poll.
Yep.
And look, we wondered, was there going to be any competition for UCLA, right? That was the question. Could anybody challenge UCLA? We still don't know the answer to that, as UCLA is unbeaten and beating teams pretty significantly. But it's pretty clear that the battle for 2 through 5
wide open
is very much alive right now.
Yep. Yeah, and we're going to talk about some of those other teams. Just flash it up on the screen here. Michigan State did beat Oregon then last night, 85-81. Again, finding new ways to win basketball games. They were better defensively against Washington than they were in this game. But there was a stretch in this game where they were down 41-27. They went on a 17-0 run to take the lead into halftime. And then it was a tussle the rest of the way, and Michigan State eventually gets the win. Again, another great game from Rashunda Jones, 23 points, 6 rebounds, 5 steals. They got a double-double out of Grace Van Sluten, 11, 6, and 4 from Kennedy Blair. Just a terrific team win. And when you're out there on the road, and look, these West Coast teams are probably like Cry Me a River, but when you're out there on the road for 5 days, it's hard. And Michigan State just goes out there and gets 2 huge road wins, and they have set themselves up to absolutely be a factor. Charlie Cream did move them into a hosting spot in last week's bracketology. So we were talking last episode about teams that had the potential. We saw about 7 teams in the Big Ten that had the potential to work their way into a hosting situation. And Michigan State is absolutely in that conversation now, despite the loss. That loss to Wisconsin could end up, Matt, feeling like that Ohio State loss to Penn State last year.
Yeah.
Where it was just a head scratcher the whole season. I think Wisconsin's a little bit better than that Penn State team was last season, but just a head scratcher to think that Michigan State lost that game, and here they are now, probably going to be a top 12 or 13 team in the AP poll when it comes out later today. Speaking of Ohio State, they had a great week. So they went out to Illinois.
Can we skip past this? I just gave you Michigan State. Can we not do this now too?
I'll take we're knocking it out off the top, Matt. Then you don't have to talk about them anymore. Ohio State goes on the road and beats Illinois 78-69. Jaloni Cambridge is having a terrific season, and she put up 41 in this game. The big thing was that Asia Wilson was there, and Jaloni Cambridge put on a show. And this was just a really impressive because, look, I've been in Illinois. We've all been in Illinois the last couple of seasons. That place has become a really good atmosphere and a really tough place to win. And Illinois just doesn't beat itself. And Ohio State just went out and took it. And if Jaloni Cambridge is going to score you 41, you're going to win a lot of games. And then she backed it up with 28 more in a road win at Maryland. I mean, those are 2 great road wins this week for Ohio State, who is another team, Matt, that's tossing their hat in the ring. You probably throw them, Michigan State, Michigan, Maryland, Iowa, in this race for the 2 seed. And it's going to be a fascinating race for the double bye in the Big Ten tournament with all these teams sitting here at 5-1, 5-0, 4-2. A lot of teams with opportunities, and Ohio State certainly one of them.
Yeah, again, you got to give them credit. That's 2 wins on the road against 2 quality teams, strong fourth quarters. If you remember Ohio State the last couple of years, they gave some games away in the fourth quarter, just weren't able to get it to the finish line sometimes. But strong fourth quarters in both of those games, especially against Maryland. You know, that was a coin flip game going to the fourth, and they end up winning by 13. Ohio State's certainly explosive. We know that. The question is, again, with Ohio State, if you can handle their pressure and if you can take some of their offensive stuff away, what do they have? And so far they've been able to answer those questions for the most part by scoring. They still have a hard time winning a low-scoring game, but it seems like right now teams are having a hard time holding them under 80.
Jaloni Cambridge feels like the solution to a lot of, well, what do we do if questions? Because last season she had those moments where she was terrific, but she also had freshman moments where she would make bad decisions. She would turn the ball over. this season, it just feels like she's been so much more seasoned in this league. And I'm workshopping something, Matt, that Cody McMahon out of the equation might be a good thing for Ohio State. I don't know if I've fully baked that in my head yet, but she needed the ball a lot in that offense. And I think her being out is now freeing up Jaloni Cambridge. I still think they could use an extra big body, although Kylie Kitts is playing well right now. But there's something about the fluidity of that offense that just seems to be working. And obviously it's spearheaded by Jaloni Cambridge. But I don't know. I didn't expect this. When I saw them in the top 5 preseason by the coaches and the media, I was like, I don't see that. I think I had them 8th or 9th in my preseason poll. And I've been proven totally wrong. I mean, this is a top 3 or 4 team in the league right now. They have wins at Illinois, at Maryland, and they're the closest team against UCLA so far. They gave them a run for their money in Columbus. So I give Kevin McGuff a lot of credit for what he has done with this team. They seem to be figuring it out. I also don't know about you, Matt, but I feel like there's a lot of runs going on in Big Ten basketball right now in terms of like in games, like just giant swings. Maryland's up 12 in this game after the first quarter and then swings all the way back to Ohio State by halftime. Like, I just feel like every time I turn on a game, I think about like your game against Oregon. I texted Dalton and I said, well, Michigan looks like they're a juggernaut. And then I stopped watching for a little bit. And then he texts me and goes, dude, here comes Oregon. And sure enough, they're on like a 16-3 run. It just feels like that's happening everywhere around the league right now. I watched one yesterday. Indiana's up 16 at the half, and Oregon goes on a 19-2 run and takes the lead. Another one where that happened, we can get off of Michigan State and Ohio State here for you, Matt. Let's talk about Oregon. We mentioned they lost to Michigan State, but they did get a big win over USC, 71-66. This also had some huge volatile moments in this game. USC is cruising in this game. They were up big early, and then it all went away. So they led 23-9 at the end of the first quarter, 37-21 at halftime, led by 9 with just under 5 minutes to go and didn't score the rest of the way. Oregon finished on a 14-0 run. They won the fourth quarter 26-8, the final. And it's a great win for Oregon on the road in LA, a team that we're trying to figure out, okay, where does Oregon sit in the NCAA tournament conversation? Charlie Cream's kind of had them around that 8-9 line. This is a big win to boost you up a little bit on the road. It just feels like the conversation to me is more about USC and paired up with their loss to Minnesota yesterday, Matt. This USC team seems like it is struggling to find its identity, certainly on the offensive side of the floor.
Yeah, no doubt. I didn't get a chance to check the box score yesterday. I do know that this game, Kennedy Smith didn't play. And I'm not sure. Okay, so, I think she's the steadying presence for them from last year as sort of a do everything, score, rebound, defend player. So without her, not necessarily shocked that they lost both of these games. You're right. The offensive, look, last year their offensive identity was give it to Juju and get out of the way. Or, hey, we've got Juju and Kiki Iriafen. Let's just let them play a little pick and roll game. And that was almost impossible to stop. Obviously, without either of those players this year, have to find something else. Jazzy Davidson has had flashes of being great. She had a big game yesterday against Minnesota, but she's just not getting enough help. And look, to me, it's not just Juju. It's the fact that they lost a couple of key. They lost Kaylee Heckel, Avery Howell, who's having a great year at Washington. There was a significant talent drain off of that team from last year. I was more surprised by what they did early in the year with some of the games that they won early in the season. I am not necessarily surprised they're struggling in conference. Here's the other thing, too. Year 2 of other teams in the Big Ten seeing these West Coast schools makes a difference. Absolutely makes a difference. And, that Oregon game was wild. Oregon was scored the first 12 of the quarter, I believe, to get within 1, then gave up a run to USC, and all of a sudden we're back down 10. and then they finish on that 14-0 run and win the game. It was an absolutely wild fourth quarter. And credit to Oregon for winning on the road against a ranked team.
Yeah, I think that's a great point because the coaching staffs across this league are so good. And so they now have film of their team playing against these teams last season. Now, UCLA might just be better than anything you can potentially do to stop them. But USC is a very different team trying to play, I think, a similar style. And I think that's where it's not working because there's two things. Obviously, you don't have Juju Watkins, but you also don't have a post presence. They don't have anybody down low to dump it to. Even when Juju would have an off day, like you said, they could get Kiki Iriafen involved. Rhea Marshall was a big body down low, and they just don't have that right now. They don't have anybody they can throw the ball into. And look, I watched Indiana play 8 games without Z, and so essentially no post presence, didn't have anybody to throw the ball into. You can't run a good offense when you don't have a threat inside the paint. And so there's only so much that Jazzy Davidson and Kara Dunn can do, especially without Kennedy Smith, as you mentioned. So I do think USC's in a weird spot. I think they're not going to be a hosting school. I still think they can be an NCAA tournament team, but they're going to have to get to work. I mean, you look at their best win right now is probably NC State, and that doesn't carry as much water as we might have thought it did when they won that game. They do have a home win against Washington, who is struggling as well right now. So you search up and down for USC and you try to figure out where do they have. Obviously, the Big Ten has a plethora of opportunities. They're going to get shots at all these teams, and they're going to win some games because of how good their defense is. Their defense is still very good, but they're going to have to find some ways to score offensively. The other LA school absolutely dominated last night. I don't think this is a huge surprise. I didn't feel like Nebraska was going to match up very well with UCLA, and they did not. This was an 83-61 win for the Bruins. It just kind of feels like they're back where they were last year, Matt, where they're just on cruise control until somebody interrupts their progress. But they get 6 players in double figures. They're very balanced. Like nobody's running. I'll be interested to see if Lauren Betts will win Player of the Year in the Big Ten because I think her numbers have been they're good. Yeah. But because they're so balanced, they're not like earth scorching. Like, does Jaloni Cambridge have an opportunity to play her way into that conversation? Does Aluchi Okanawa have an opportunity to work her way in if Maryland finishes strong? Does Olivia Olson have a chance to do it at Michigan? But they're just so balanced. They can beat you in so many different ways. And this game was kind of a UCLA game where it's just a slow bleed. Yeah. They lost every quarter by 6 to 10 points, and you lose by 22.
Well, I mean, you start with the dominance of Lauren Betts, right? First, I mean, who has the size to match up against Lauren Betts?
Nobody.
Nobody. So let's start there. And then let's, bring back players. Let's bring back Dugalich. Let's bring back a couple of players from last year. And then how about let's add Gianna Neepkins with her shooting ability. And then let's add a Charlize Ledger-Walker, who's, a veteran player who knows how to score. And then let's add another 6'4" post in Sienna Betts.
Who's playing well right now.
And look, here's the only way I think you beat UCLA, okay? You got to get them in foul trouble. You got to attack them early. You got to get them into some foul trouble, get them on their heels because they have no depth, okay? This is a 6-player team at most.
7
their depth
with Sierra Betts.
Their depth all transferred at the end of last year. So what they got is what they got.
Yep.
If they suffer any kind of an injury, and Betts was hurt early in the year, I think that was some of the reason they were a little slow starting. Not Lauren, but Sienna. But that 7, boy, that 7 is as good as any you're going to see at the top of any school's lineup anywhere.
Yeah, that's a team that I'm waiting on that matchup in Ann Arbor. We're going to see Maryland go out there this weekend. We're going to talk about it in a minute. I was starting to lose some faith in Maryland. I still think they're fine, but these injuries are starting to catch up to them. I think they're just so depleted. They've had, I believe, 4 players already out for the year. So that's going to catch up to you at some point. I'd love to see UCLA. I can't wait for that matchup with Michigan. We saw them play Ohio State. Iowa will go out to LA at some point this season. So
I want to make you. I want to step in. I want to make you feel a little better, real quick, because I know we're going to get to your team, and you've been playing a gauntlet of games right now. We'll talk about yesterday. I'm going to tell you what my February looks like. You ready for this? Starting February 1st, at Michigan State, home Nebraska, home UCLA, at Northwestern, home Michigan State, at Iowa, at Ohio State, home Maryland. How's that sound for a month of February?
I'm telling you, everyone's going to have it. And that's why, I'm not trying to complain too much. It's just that Indiana's happened to be the first couple of weeks. This conference is so loaded that everyone's going to have it. It is just crazy that there is a definitive, or at least coming into the season, there was a definitive 5 teams that were battling for the final 2 spots in the Big Ten tournament. And Indiana doesn't play any of those teams until the 9th game of the Big Ten season.
Yeah.
So now Indiana looks like, and I will still defend my Hoosiers, they look like they're a team that might miss the Big Ten tournament. They're not going to miss the Big Ten tournament. This team is going to, I still think they are better than some of those teams at the bottom. And when they get a chance to play them, they will show that. We'll talk about Indiana later, though. You got me started there. But yeah, there's a gauntlet. There's always going to be a gauntlet.
Yeah.
And Michigan's is coming up, and it's going to be a lot of fun to see how they handle it. They have 1 loss right now on the road at Washington. Some other stuff wanted to throw out. We did mention this. Minnesota with a nice win over USC. We talked about the struggles for the Trojans, but we should not diminish Oregon and Minnesota getting good come-from-behind victories. This was another game where USC led by double figures. Grace Gracholski's playing some really good basketball this week. She played well against you guys up in Ann Arbor, and then she plays very well in this game, and they get a nice win here for a Minnesota team trying to pull itself off the bubble and more comfortably in the field. How about this one? Purdue wins at home over Washington, 78-72. We mentioned this was not a great week for Washington. Purdue went on a 17-0 run over about 7.5 minutes of game time at the end of the 4th quarter and a good chunk of overtime. Washington just forgot how to score and went from up. They were up like 10, up 8, something like that. Then it's a tie game, and then they lose the lead in overtime, and they just dug themselves such a big hole they couldn't get back into it. Washington, you've seen them in person. They feel like a team with a wide range of results. They feel like if they're on, they can beat just about anybody. We saw them beat Michigan. But I think when things are not working, this is what can happen. And I this was a head scratcher to me because I was pretty high on Washington.
Well, I'll tell you what happened at the end of our game, and maybe this is what happened yesterday, and I didn't get a chance to watch it. But against us, Austin, they had an 18-point lead, 17-point lead starting the 4th quarter. And they played the 4th quarter as if they had no more interest in scoring points. They were up 51-30, might have been 51-33. And they were, every possession was down to the last second. There was no urgency to get shots up. They turned it over 10 times against us in the 4th quarter. Now we cranked up the pressure a little bit late to get some of those, and we got a little blitz, and I think we got within 5 it was. But they just offensively were they just didn't care. They were not running anything that was, it was like they were good with 51 points and the other team wasn't going to be able to come from behind. Maybe that's what happened yesterday. I don't know. They can be a good team in the half court when they execute, but if you can bother them and take them out of what they want to do, really Sellers is to me their only creator. They rely a lot on the jump shot, and I think they're still a group that's trying to figure out how to play together too. Avery Howell is in their starting lineup now as a big addition. And their parts and pieces that come off the bench are all interchangeable. I mean, you could throw Tegan Brown, Devin Koplinger, Hannah Steins. You could put them all in a hat and mix them up, and the same player pretty much pops out. They're just – so it's a lot of the sameness from them, and I think that's what can sometimes make them struggle is they just don't have that dynamism sometimes when they get in these games. I'm happy for Tim Newton, the dean of our profession here.
Great
I
week.
texted him after Thursday's game and said, hey, great win, first one in 11 months in the Big Ten. This also includes football because he calls football for Purdue. So it's been a rough go for our buddy Tim. So I'm happy for him to get a couple of wins.
We do love Tim, and very happy for him. It was a great week for Purdue. Could go a long way to making sure they are in Indianapolis. They were not there last season. I did notice some of those same trends. I did watch this game down the stretch, and it did just kind of feel like Washington was a little bit listless offensively, just going with the flow, driving to the basket, taking a contested shot, not crashing the boards. And Purdue was able to get what they wanted on offense. And I don't know how she's still playing, but Madison Layden-Zay, I feel like she's been there forever. And then, like, she didn't play last year, so I thought she was done. And then now she's back. Set the Purdue career 3-point makes record yesterday in that game. And she's been great, was great in both of these games this week, averaged 18.5 a game this week. And again, Wisconsin's win over Michigan State, Purdue's win over Washington. We always say if you want to get out of that group at the bottom and make it to the Big Ten tournament, you got to beat each other. Well, you get a win over somebody else, all of a sudden you prop yourself up. So now I'm looking at right now the bottom three is Indiana, Penn State, and Rutgers. To me, I still think Indiana is better than both of those schools, and I think they're better than Northwestern. So to me, if I'm Northwestern, Rutgers, and Penn State, I'm looking at myself going, okay, we're going to have to get somebody. We're going to have to get somebody here over the next couple of weeks to prop ourselves back up into that conversation, because Purdue gets two big wins here over Washington and Wisconsin this week. We touched on it a little bit. Give you a chance to talk about your Wolverines. They beat Minnesota 70-60. This was a fun game. This was back and forth. Minnesota got off to a great start offensively and defensively. And then you guys kind of started to assert yourselves a little bit. It was an off night for Silas Swords, who then did not play over the weekend, I believe, correct, against Wisconsin.
Yeah, she was out Sunday.
It just feels like Michigan is this was a nice bounce back for them after the Washington loss, and just a well put together team. I'll give you the floor on what you thought about this game.
Yeah, I mean, we changed the tempo in the second quarter, which was the big thing. We got down by a dozen early, changed the tempo, went to some pressure, forced some turnovers, got back in the game by one, down one at the half. And then the third and fourth quarter, really back and forth until we were finally able to kind of separate a little bit in the fourth. A couple of things about this game from Michigan's standpoint. We made free throws down the stretch. Everybody has seen our percentage. We shoot about 66% as a team. We missed 20-some free throws in that double overtime game to Oregon. We made our free throws down the stretch against Minnesota to help put that game away. Here's the other thing that really impressed me about Michigan this week, and it's going to sound funny to say, but we came off the West Coast trip, and we did not get a bye. Not only did we not get a bye, we had to play 3 games in 6 days with a travel day in between. That was a big ask, and look, other teams, I know the West Coast teams don't care about this, and I understand that. We're dealing with a different dynamic in the travel than they are. But I thought that was a key game for us to win that game on the turnaround after the West Coast to beat Minnesota in that game, because they'd had a week off, hadn't played before coming into that game. Minnesota's a good team. I think they got a chance to win 10 games in the conference. I like their personnel. Grace Grahalski, you mentioned, really like her game. She's gone from what I felt like was just a shooter in her first year as a freshman to now as a junior. She does everything. She can shoot. She's a 3-level scorer. She's got the ability to put the ball on the floor and help her teammates as well. So for us to get that one was a good kickstart. And then the last 2 games, we played those lower teams in the Big Ten and did what we were supposed to do. Got up early and were able to just kind of cruise from there. But that was a big win to kickstart the week for us.
Well, I mentioned this on the last pod, and this is absolutely something to watch on the Minnesota schedule. And it happened in that. Now, they didn't get it done against Michigan, but Minnesota is going to play 6 of their 18 games in the Big Ten against a team coming off of a West Coast, East Coast road trip without a bye. Wow. They're going to play 6 different teams in that scenario. So can they catch a couple of those teams where they're tired? They almost got Michigan. They're also going to get it against Washington coming up on Sunday. Now, that will be in Seattle. but it will be after Washington had spent a week against Purdue and Indiana. Then they come home and now they got to play Minnesota after a long week of travel. It's also going to happen against Iowa. It's also going to happen against Oregon, Penn State, Rutgers, and Washington, as I mentioned. So that was something I picked up on when I was going through the schedules before the season. Iowa does it 4 times, Indiana 3 times, but 2 of the 3 for Indiana are their 2 road games in LA. They get both of those teams after they come back. It's not a huge difference, but like Minnesota's jumped out to me as like, whoa, they're going to get 6 different teams off a multi-time zone travel week without a bye. That's huge and could produce some extra wins for Minnesota. It is crazy that not only did you guys not get the bye, you then had to play 3 games in 6 days. The Hoosiers, I know we get a bye after we go out west, so that does make a difference.
Well, I tell you what, it'll be interesting to see. The reason is because next week, Austin, we're playing a non-conference game. We've got that matchup with Vanderbilt in that Coretta Scott King Classic. So that takes out a Big Ten weekend. And it also limited us in the front end in terms of how many games we played in non-conference play. So I know we're thrilled to be a part of that event. We're going to get a great game against Vanderbilt. That's going to be probably 2 top 10 teams, a national showcase in terms of television as well. But with the ripple effects that has had on our schedule, I wonder how likely we would be to repeat that sort of thing where we throw a non-conference game in sometime later in the year.
Yeah, Brenda Fries has done that a lot with Maryland. They did not do that this year. I'm curious if because of how tough the Big Ten is getting, if that becomes less and less of a thing. But a couple Big Ten teams are doing that. I forget who the other team is involved. Do you know what?
Ohio State. They're playing TCU in game 1. So it's going to be 4 top 15 teams in those games, which is a great showcase for women's college basketball.
Yep, it's great for us as neutrals. It's tough on the teams for sure. Other stuff that happened this week, I just want to throw these up on the screen. You touched on a few of them with Michigan. Iowa got a couple of wins this week. They beat Northwestern and Indiana in a just ugly defensive basketball game, 56-53. Nebraska, I put that wrong on the screen now that I see that. Indiana did not beat Nebraska. I wish that was the case. Nebraska beat Indiana 78-73. Northwestern got its first win. Again, that one's right. We're just going to take this graphic out. I must have been really tired this morning when I made that. That's what you get when the graphic department is one person.
There you go.
Northwestern did get its first win, though, against Rutgers yesterday, so they are on the board. It's hard not to root for them, for Joe McEwen. His final year, he's on the retirement tour, hoping that they can find their way into Indianapolis for the Big Ten tournament. I was asked a couple of questions on Twitter from one of our IU fan listeners who listens to us a lot, listens to me a lot. So I'm going to give her some responses here to her questions. Kristen Kruger asked, curious your thoughts on if Indiana can turn it around. They seem to be making improvements, but can't get over the hump. Yes, they are making improvements. They are better than they were a month ago. Xenia Soka-Guman being back helps that. She's made 9 starts this season and has 5 double-doubles. She is an absolute machine when she's out there, at least on the glass. Iowa took her a little bit out of her game because of Iowa's size. She was not able to do much with her back to the basket yesterday. Indiana, again, I wish that the schedule was a little different for this young, new Indiana team because they've just, their last 4 games have just been brutal. They've been beaten and battered here with Michigan State and then Maryland and then Nebraska and then Iowa. Now it's Washington, then it's at Ohio State. So it doesn't get any easier. But yesterday was there for the taking for Indiana. The issue is they at times are just very Shea Chesky reliant. And they got very Shea Chesky reliant against Iowa. They really, she was great in the first half, had 19 points on 8 of 13 shooting. And then she kind of just went sideways there in the second half. So hopeful that she will, that Indiana will figure it out. I think they can beat Washington on Wednesday. And we'll see. We'll see what happens moving forward. But I do think Indiana is making improvements. Terry Moore has been saying that to me in all the interviews we've been doing is, look, we're not winning, but there's momentum in how we're playing right now. I think yesterday might have hurt some of that momentum with the way you lose that game in a very winnable situation. but hopefully Indiana can continue to improve moving forward. But it's just we have to remember it's a young team. It's a team that literally had one player who had started any games in conference before this season. So there was going to be a work in progress, and it has been. There's been some bumps in the road. I do think they're better than their record, and hopefully that will come to show at some point.
Yeah, and Austin, I think for you guys, it's a different position than you've been in the last few years, obviously. Yeah. But it's not dissimilar to what we were doing at the top last year. It's just going to be you're looking at the bottom. So you're going, okay, down there we've got Purdue, we've got Rutgers, Penn State, we've got Northwestern. We haven't played any of those teams yet, and those are all teams that we feel like we can beat. So when you're talking about just getting to the tournament, that's what last year it was, okay, who hasn't gone out west yet? Who hasn't played USC and UCLA? Because your record might have been inflated at the top because you hadn't. I think of Illinois. Illinois was, I think, 11-4, and they hadn't played out those guys yet. And so those games were losses for everybody last year, and that helped to depress the standings at the top. It's a different way to look at it, but you're right. You guys haven't had your opportunities against the lower class yet in the Big Ten. If you start losing those games, that's when you start to worry. But you hope that you've iron sharpens iron as you play these better teams. You're getting better, you're improving, and then that shows when you play against maybe some of those teams towards the bottom of the standings right now.
A little bit about like what Washington did last year. I think they were 5-9 in the Big Ten, won their final 4 games, and then beat Minnesota in the Big Ten tournament. Actually got into the NCAA tournament. That seems less likely for Indiana at this point, but the note stays the same. This is the schedule starting January 25th. It's at Purdue. Michigan is in there, but then Northwestern, at Wisconsin, Purdue again, then the LA trip, but then Oregon at home, at Rutgers, Penn State at home. There's a ton of winnable games there in February. I was saying it all preseason. You got to survive January to get to February. Indiana is not necessarily surviving, but I do think they are improving, and you hope that, and this is what I would imagine, and we're going to talk to Coach Moore about it tonight on our coaches show. You got to keep the mood, the spirits up, because there is still a ton to play for in the month of February. And again, Washington's a winnable game for Indiana on Wednesday. We saw them just lose to Purdue. Indiana could go and get that one. The other question that Kristen asked was she's curious about our thoughts on Iowa after playing 2 very close road games with IU and Northwestern, teams they should have handled better on paper, but also their adjustments at halftime against Indiana were incredible, and credit goes to them. I get this is a good time, I think, to transition into the Dribble Drive Power 5 here. This is where I dropped Iowa 2 spots this week. Dalton doesn't even have Iowa in his top 5. He was jet lagged. So if you're an Iowa fan, you can be mad at jet lag. I don't want to I just was not, I worry about Iowa in a, when I need a basket, where am I going situation for the Hawkeyes. I don't know who that is. I don't think it's Hannah Stalkey. It's not really Ava Hayden, although she is talented and showed off some good post moves yesterday. It's probably Chit Chat Wright, but she did not have a great game yesterday. That's my concern when they start to play the UCLAs, the USCs, the Michigans, the Ohio States, the top of the Big Ten. Where do they go when they need a bucket? That's my question for Iowa. But what they have shown is they can win in a shootout. They can win in a defensive battle. So that certainly carries weight for Iowa. They're undefeated in the Big Ten. That absolutely matters. But yeah, it wasn't a pretty performance by them again on Monday against Northwestern or against Indiana. But finding a way to win matters in this conference, and they are doing that.
They've got grizzled veterans. Yeah. Feuerbach, McCabe, Stolke, players that have played in a lot of big games at their time at Iowa. They don't have the skill they've had in recent years. That's obvious. And offensively, look, we knew you couldn't necessarily continue at the heights when CC was there. But their offense, to me, has taken a significant step back this year. look, as you said, credit for any win in this conference, no matter who it is or where it is. But I do think we could look back in a month and go, okay, yeah, I see how Iowa went from where they are now to wherever they are then.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And I just now I have seen Michigan State and Iowa, and I was really impressed with the way the Spartans play. And I'm impressed with Iowa that they were down 16. They didn't quit. They came back and won that game. And Kylie Feuerbach is a tremendous defender. She was all over. Shea Chesky really took her out of the game in that second half. But I walk away going, can I really believe that team is better than these four above them in my standings? Like, I don't think they're better than Michigan. I don't think they're better than Ohio State. I don't think they're better than Michigan State. Speaking of schedules, it hasn't been the toughest to start the year for Iowa. They have wins over Rutgers, Penn State, Northwestern, home win against Nebraska, always tough to beat your rival, and then a road win at Indiana. So 3 of their 5 wins are against teams that don't have a win in the Big Ten. Northwestern is 1-5, and the Nebraska's 3-3. So they haven't beaten a team with a winning record in conference play yet. So keep a grain of salt on that 5-0 record. I do think that they can win Thursday. They've got Oregon coming to Iowa City. Then we're going to see Michigan State go to Iowa on Sunday. Then they go to Maryland. Then it's Ohio State. Then it's at USC, at UCLA. So it's really going to crank up. We mentioned that Indiana gets all those bottom teams at the end of the season. Iowa's already played most of them.
Yeah.
Purdue's the only one left. So it's going to get real for the Hawkeyes here. And like you said, I think in 2 weeks we could see them being like the 7th or 8th best team in the Big Ten and kind of be like, yeah, we saw that one coming.
Yeah.
But I bumped them down too. Dalton jumped them all the way down. It's hard not to respect what Ohio State's doing. It's hard not to respect what Michigan State is doing. I tussled between Maryland and Iowa at 5 and 6. I think you could go either way on that. But I do think it's kind of a 2 through 6 situation, and maybe 7 if you want to throw Illinois into the conversation as well. Sitting at 4 and 2 or better in league play, and having an opportunity to position themselves for a double bye. That feels like it's going to be the more fascinating race than it is for the Big Ten title. It feels like it's UCLA's right now. Obviously, they still have to go to Ann Arbor. They still have to play. They still have to go to that's going to be we're going to find a lot out about UCLA when they do that trip to the Mitten State. They're going to play Michigan State and Michigan back-to-back games. If they get through that unscathed, it feels like that's about all she wrote for the Big Ten Conference title. But I do think the more fascinating race is going to be for that double bye and who can get the 2 through 4 seeds.
I agree with you 100%. It's going to take a tremendous game for both Michigan and Michigan State if they're going to pull that upset off. I think both teams certainly are capable, but you would say that they'll need to play one of their best games of the season in order to beat UCLA. For us, it's scheduled on Super Bowl Sunday at 3:00. I hope we get a great crowd in there, because that would certainly be something that would help to try to put some pressure on UCLA. But how many people are going to want to sit at home on their couch and just watch that game on Fox for a couple hours and then start their Super Bowl party? I don't know. So I'm starting the case now that you need to come out to Chrysler on that day, because it's going to be probably one of the more anticipated regular season games we've had in Ann Arbor before the next week when we welcome Michigan State in and retire Naz Hillman's jersey. So those 2 Sundays are going to be fun.
That's absolutely must be at that game there if you're a Michigan fan. These are the standings in the Big Ten right now. We've talked about it. There's 2 undefeated teams, UCLA and Iowa. You've got a trio at 5 and 1. You've got a couple sitting there at 4 and 2. And I think last week we did the who can host as kind of a barometer of what we think of teams in the Big Ten. I think it was those top 6 and USC. I'm taking USC out. I don't think they're going to host. So I think it's the top 6. I don't think Illinois will be in that conversation. They don't have a lot of meat to their non-conference bone. They won at Florida State, but they lost at Oregon State. So I think it's Maryland and up. that can host. Maryland's on thin ice. They've got to have a really good Big Ten season because they don't have a lot from their non-conference. They did beat Kentucky, and that will carry some weight, but it was not a typical Brenda Freeze tough non-conference season. So I do think they're on thin ice a little bit. I think Ohio State has worked their way into that conversation for sure. They have that win over Belmont in the non-con, but that's about it for them. Their only losses this season for the Buckeyes are UConn and UCLA. So they're right there in that conversation. And then Michigan State, Michigan, Iowa, you have to throw them in there with a 5-0 Big Ten record and what they have done. If you're talking about teams that can do it, Iowa still can. Do I think they will? No, but can they? Yes. Charlie Cream has them as a 3 seed right now. A couple weeks ago when Dalton and I did the exercise of higher and lower on seeds, we both said higher for Iowa when they were listed as a 3. We both think, and by higher, we mean the number will get higher.
Sure.
So we both see them dropping a few seed lines, but as of right now, they have to be in that conversation.
Yeah, with what they've done so far, I mean, you can't project what might happen when they go out to the West Coast and all these other things, but certainly right now they're in that conversation. One thing that's going to be interesting to me, Austin, as you look at all those teams in not excluding UCLA, let's look at 2 through 6, okay? None of those teams have a lot of signature non-conference wins,
Yep.
okay? Michigan's best win, Notre Dame. We're getting as much credit for losing to UConn, I think, as we are for winning against Notre Dame.
Absolutely.
Our only other P4 non-conference win is Syracuse. We'll see if they are going to be in the tournament mix or not. Right now, I think they're going to be closer to the bubble than anywhere else, but we'll see. Maryland doesn't have, I mean, Ohio State, you said Belmont. I think Monday for them next week, TCU, is a huge game.
I forgot about West Virginia as well. Sorry, they did beat West Virginia.
You're right. That's a good win. But I think that TCU game is huge because those two teams could come down to each other, as a head-to-head comparison for a hosting site.
Same with Vandy for Michigan. I think that's a huge game.
It's a huge opportunity for us. Absolutely. That could be the kind of game that could really almost cement us as a host. I saw we dropped to a 4. In bracketology in terms of where we are. We're number 6 in the net, so I don't know if that's accurate, but it is what it is. If you're basing resumes right now, again, our best win is Notre Dame, and Notre Dame's a 6-7 seed at the moment. Michigan State didn't play anybody really in non-conference. That's why we had the questions about how good they would be.
They have the Ole Miss win. That's
so,
what they've got.
Correct. So for each of these teams, it's really going to be about how many wins do they stack up in the conference. And that could be a problem only if these teams start beating each other and neutralizing themselves. Then how many teams still stay in that top 4?
It could be just like last year where everybody kind of ate each other alive. Maryland and Ohio State eked out into hosting situations, but then you had a bunch of teams just kind of in that range of Illinois, Iowa, Michigan, just hanging out. Michigan State. That's the worst case scenario if you're the Big Ten, is that everybody beats up on each other. And you're looking at these standings if you're watching us on YouTube, and there's just a giant pack right there between 4-2 and 2-4. It goes from 6 to 14. Do I think Wisconsin's going to stay in the middle there? No, but they've got themselves a nice head start on some of these teams at the bottom. Like you're looking at trying to make it to Indianapolis in year 1 for Robin Pinchton. You've got a 3-game lead right now at the quarter or at the third mark of the Big Ten. It's a good spot to be in, knowing they still have a couple of those teams still to play down below. Purdue's in a good spot, sitting at 2-4 right now. They've got a 2-game lead, a quarter or a third of the way through the season. So that's kind of what you're looking at. Like if you're Indiana, you've got opportunities ahead of you, but you are going to need to make sure you take advantage of those because you're sitting here at 0-6, which is last place right now. So there's a lot to be fought for in this Big Ten, and I think we're going to see some more depth and parity shown in the conference. And like teams like Minnesota and Nebraska are going to beat some teams. They're going to lose to some teams. There's going to be a lot that still happens in this conference.
Absolutely. And I think if you're Ohio State right now, I think what you sit there and look at is you go, okay, we're 5-1, but we're really 5-0 because we lost to UCLA. And let's just assume that UCLA is the best team in the conference and nobody can beat them. We've already played them, we've already taken the loss, and we're taking care of business against everybody else. I think there's a little bit of that philosophy that you're going to see over the course of and look, if some of those teams at the top, Michigan and Michigan State play twice. Ohio State and Maryland play twice.
Yep.
Does one of those teams sweep the other? That would be a huge thing in terms of both their seeding and for the double bye when we get to the Big Ten tournament. Those matchups between Iowa and Nebraska. Can Iowa beat Nebraska again after already beating them once? Those are going to be important games.
That's a great point about the UCLA thing. You let's just say they do run the table. So yeah, you're sitting here, and Iowa's also 5-1, and Michigan's 5-2, and Michigan State's 5, and you just add a loss to everybody's record. Ohio State's already played them, done and gone. We'll see you guys in March. Like, they don't have to worry about it. The double plays are big. I mean, UCLA's double play is USC, who doesn't look to be as strong this season in years past. Minnesota's double play is Wisconsin. You got to think they like their opportunities there. Illinois' double play is Northwestern. You got to feel like they like that situation. That could certainly play a factor into what happens here. There's so much that could certainly weigh into this thing. Our stars of the week, I gave 3 stars out. Rashonda Jones got 1 for her performances this week out west for Michigan State. She was terrific. Jaloni Cambridge, hard not to give her a star. 41 points against Illinois, averaged 34.5, 7.5 rebounds, and 7 assists the game this week. And then Madison Layden-Zay, she set that 3-point record for Purdue. She had 18.5 points a game as Purdue goes 2-0 this week through her star as well. Some of the other performances I thought were worth shouting out. We saw Barry Wallace go for 28 and Maddie Weber go for 26 in their win over Penn State. I mentioned that Xenia Soka-Guman had back-to-back double-doubles for the Hoosiers. Yarden Garzone went 11 for 16 from the three-point line this week for Maryland. Olivia Olson averaged over 18 a game this week for Michigan. Grace Groholski had that big 25-point game against USC. And Kara Dunn put up 27 at Minnesota, averaged 24 a game this week. A tough week for USC. Those are the stars of the week. Matt, let me throw some games at you this week. See what piques your interest. These are some of the big games. It's a weird schedule because just about everybody's playing on the same day. It's a bunch of games on Thursday. It's a bunch of games on Sunday. The UCLA at Minnesota game, I think, is a standalone on Wednesday. It's interesting just because I'm curious. Second game of the road trip. Minnesota's a team that is just going to make you earn it. You don't beat, like, Don Plutz-White teams don't beat themselves typically. They're very fundamentally sound. I don't think they're going to beat UCLA. I'm just curious if they can drag UCLA down into a fist fight with them.
Well, I think the one thing that'll be interesting to watch in that matchup is, we talked about the size that UCLA has with Lauren Betts. Can anybody match it? Minnesota actually has some good size. Sophie Hart and Finau Tonga off the bench is a player who is really physical on the interior. So you got a couple of players there that I think can at least give you the opportunity to defend Lauren Betts a little differently. Maybe you don't have to double her. You can try to give those two some one-on-one opportunities. Maybe they're strong enough to push her off the block just a little bit further away from where she likes to be. And then they got the ability to shoot the three. Anytime you're going to pull an upset against a team that's better than you, the more you can get threes for twos, that helps you. I saw that on the men's side with Wisconsin against Michigan the other day, making 14 threes in that game. The three-point shot can be a big weapon. Minnesota shoots it well. So if you can do those two things, that gives you a chance. And you play at home, second game of the road trip for UCLA. I'm curious to watch that game. Obviously, Maryland going out there out west, how do they do? Can they sweep those two schools? Can they at least split? That they've got to split in order to stay in the conference race, you would think at this point. And then Michigan State, it's an interesting week for the Spartans. home Nebraska. That's a team that historically has given Michigan State trouble.
Yes.
Even in East Lansing.
Typically
And then going to Iowa. That's a tough 2-game tango for Michigan State this week. So those games jump out at me.
I don't know about you, but we need to ban 8 p.m. on Sunday games. That's just, what are we? I know it's TV. Come on. We don't need 8 p.m. on Sunday. That's good. We might not have Dalton next Monday either with an 8 p.m. Sunday night game. That's a tough one there in Iowa City. They'll be revved up for that one.
I'm totally with you. Those games are tough. They're tough for the players too. I mean, it's a lot of sitting around and waiting. I always talk at the Big Ten tournament, when you get that 3 seed and you're the last team to play in the tournament and you're playing at 9 at night or whatever for the first time, it gets hard. It really is. That's such an odd, again, what do you do all day? You're just sitting around waiting.
It's pretty early, right? I mean,
yeah, because they start the game so early. If you want to shoot in the gym, you got to be there at 10:30 in the morning, and then what? I'm with you. I'd love to get rid of those late tips. You and I both know they're not going anywhere. So.
No, they are not. But boy, I think our families would appreciate that too. They're not rolling in at 1 a.m. But yeah, there's some big games here. You highlighted the big ones. I think Illinois at Michigan is an intriguing game. The Illini have seemed to be. It kind of feels like the Illini are like the best of the rest right now in the Big Ten. Like, I think there's that food group at the top. And then there's like Illinois and Minnesota and Nebraska who are like trying to punch through. And Illinois has been the best of that so far. I'm intrigued by Minnesota's week because Minnesota's a what if team for me. Like, they should have a win over Maryland. They should be 4-1 in the Big Ten right now. Obviously, they didn't get it, and I know I keep harping on this. But they should be 4-1. They had that game. And really, they played well at Michigan, too, and could have won that game. That's not a should have, but certainly could have. Mm-hmm. So they lose to UCLA. They're going to be 3-3 in the Big Ten, and then they got to go out west. And at Washington and at Oregon is not an easy ask. So it would be weird if Minnesota's all of a sudden sitting at 3-5, and you're like, man, that team's better than that record. But this is a tough week for them, and they got to go out there out west and get some wins for sure. Just through the Rutgers, Penn State on there as well. Sunday, somebody's going to get their first
Somebody's going to win.
Somebody's got to win, and that could go a long way into determining who could inch their way. Penn State, I know you just saw them, Matt. They do not play defense.
No, they don't.
I'm not trying to be hard on them. They are a great offensive team, but they just do not play defense.
Yeah, they give up 100. I think that's probably 4 times in the Big Ten they've given up 100.
They've given up over 80 points a game in conference play.
I could spend 10 minutes on why Penn State is where they are, but the bottom line is that it's just not working right now in Happy Valley. And I'm not sure exactly how to fix it. But McMillan and Merkel are a nice start, but as a team, the pieces are not adding up right now.
Yeah, and Rutgers, I know they've had some tough performances. I think they have more of an identity than Penn State does.
I agree.
In the sense of they're going to make it physical. They're going to try, like they drug Michigan State down into a rock fight, nearly won that game in the Breslin Center, and they really should have beaten Wisconsin. They blew that game as well. But Rutgers, to me, has an identity. You're going to get into a fist fight with them. So we'll see which style comes out, more of a fist fight or more of the offensive finesse performance of Penn State. Somebody's going to win, as you said.
Somebody's going to win
here on Sunday, and somebody will get their first win in Big Ten play. Any parting thoughts from you on what was a wild week in the Big Ten and what will certainly be another wild week coming up over the next 7 days?
Yeah, it's going to be, again, I think the biggest thing to watch going forward, and we've talked about it a little bit, is, when these teams get their opportunities against the quality opponents, can anybody punch above their weight class like you just mentioned? I mean, for Illinois, Thursday represents a giant opportunity for them. Coming to Ann Arbor, We didn't have Silas Swords on Sunday. Not sure what her status will be for this week. But, a game like that is an opportunity for them. Nebraska going on the road this week to Michigan State. It's an opportunity for Nebraska, which has not been able to get one of those signature wins yet. If those teams can knock off some of these upper crust, we think 2 through 5 teams, let's take UCLA out, but let's go with, that 2 through 5, Iowa, Michigan State, Ohio State, Maryland. Any of the lower teams that knock those guys off are going to significantly help themselves when it comes to their seeding for the NCAA tournament, because these are all going to be tournament teams.
Yeah.
That group of teams, Minnesota, Illinois, USC, Nebraska, they're all NCAA tournament teams. They're that good. Oregon, Washington. But can they get from that 8 to the 10 seed range into the 6 to 7 range? And it's going to require some of the wins against the top teams. And for the top teams, can they hold serve? Can they really create that separation between themselves and the rest of the league? That is going to be fascinating to me to see what those teams can do with that, because Michigan State's got this stretch, 2 ranked teams coming up. Like I told you about, February for Michigan is going to be that way. Iowa hasn't seen any of the good teams yet. Mm-hmm. When that competition really kicks off, do we see that separation between the top and the middle? Right now we see it from the middle to the bottom. Will we see it from the top to the middle?
Yeah, I think about like a Michigan. Your loss to Washington needs to be the only loss that you give up to that kind of mid-tier group.
Right.
You can't afford to lose to Illinois or Nebraska, or they beat Oregon. You gotta now hold serve, and you got to make sure that you separate yourselves from the Illinois of the world. Michigan State, you've been great. You've been one of the big risers here over the last couple of weeks. Now you're going to get some real stern tests back to back to back. Can you hold on to it? Going to be a fascinating week. There's a lot to determine in the Big Ten as we go, and we still have a month and a half of this to sort out. We always say things will get sorted out. It could also be like last year, where it just becomes muddier and muddier as the season goes on. We'll certainly find out as we go. Well, Matt, thank you so much for subbing in. We appreciate it. We might dial your number again next week. Who knows what Dalton's status might be on that late night game in Iowa City, but we appreciate you stepping in.
All right. I just want some creative control that we don't have to start with Michigan State and Ohio State right off the bat if I fill in again, okay? You got to break them up a little bit.
I think we can make it work. I hope the last 50 minutes of the show were better for you after we knocked that early segment out. Matt Park from Michigan Women's Basketball subbing in for us. Thank you all for listening. Check us out on the Back Home Network YouTube channel. Also, give us a download on Apple and Spotify podcast. For Matt Park, I'm Austin Ritter saying so long from episode 85 of the Dribble Drive.